You know that feeling in a thriller movie? The detective walks into a room, pins this massive map to the wall, and starts connecting red strings between photos.
Oh yeah, the classic conspiracy board, it's a staple.
Exactly. And in the movies, that web, it just always gets bigger and bigger. They start with a murder in New York, and 20 minutes later, they're onto a global smuggling ring.
Right, or some secret society in Europe, the scope just expands until it feels like it engulfs the whole world. It raises the stakes, makes for great cinema.
But today, we're looking at a case that completely inverts that. We're doing a deep dive into the 2001 FBI Anthrax letters investigation, specifically a phase the source material calls Episode 3, when the focus narrowed. And the core idea here is really, it's pretty counterintuitive.
Right, because real massive investigations, well, the successful ones anyway, they don't expand forever, they contract.
And that is our mission today. We're going to unpack that exact moment when the FBI stopped looking at the entire planet for the source of the anthrax and started looking inward. We're going to see how you build a box around a suspect when you don't even have a name. You're just relying on psychological profiling, heavy-duty forensics, and this is the part that really got me. The terrifying gap between, airtight security systems and simple human trust.
It is a fascinating pivot point. You're moving from a state of really global panic, where the threat could be from anywhere, to this very specific, almost claustrophobic scrutiny of a tiny community.
So let's start with that. The headline concept, the investigation contracts. Why? Logically, if you haven't found the bad guy, shouldn't you be widening the net?
You'd think so. That's the instinct. But the source makes a very pragmatic, almost ruthless point about resource management, the universe of possibilities that has to shrink. Not because the answers are suddenly obvious, but because resources are finite.
Even for the FBI.
Especially for the FBI in 2001. You have to remember the context. This is right after 9/11. The entire intelligence apparatus is just overwhelmed. They're chasing thousands of false leads, hoaxes, white powder scares and mailrooms across America.
Right. You simply cannot investigate everyone everywhere forever.
So they have to filter. They have to cut away the noise.
Well, it goes even deeper than filtering. There's this concept mentioned in the material. Systems prefer manageable problems.
Systems prefer manageable problems.
Yeah.
I actually paused on that line. It feels like it applies to everything, not just, criminal investigations.
It really does. It's a fundamental rule of how institutions and people really operate.
It's like when my garage is a total disaster zone.
Yeah.
If I look at the whole mess, the bikes, the boxes, the tools, I just freeze up. I'll never clean it. But if I say, okay, today I'm just going to organize the tool bench, then suddenly I can function.
That's a perfect analogy.
I have to turn this chaotic, amorphous problem into something bounded and manageable.
And that's exactly it. The FBI was dealing with a chaotic global problem. Was it Al-Qaeda? Was it Iraq? A domestic militia? Some lone Unabomber type? That is an unmanageable problem set.
Way too big.
So to solve it, they had to simplify it. They had to create these artificial boundaries just to make the data processable.
And this necessity, it forces that pivot we read about. They turn away from the external threats, the foreign agents, all the unknown variables, and they turn inward.
And that turning inward, it changes the entire texture of the investigation. It stops being a manhunt for a stranger in a cave halfway across the world, and it starts becoming an audit of a very specific American professional class.
Which is a huge shift. You go from looking for the enemy, with a capital E, to looking for a citizen, a professional, maybe even a patriot.
Exactly. And that is uncomfortable. But let's look at how they define that professional. Because at this stage, they still don't have a name, they don't have a photo, but they do have a profile.
Right. And we should be clear what a profile is in this context. It's not just a guess or a hunch. It's a set of, non-negotiable criteria derived from the crime itself.
It's a filter on a database, really. You aren't searching for John Smith. You're searching for male, scientific background, specific access.
The source lists some specific traits for this type. Let's run through them because they really act as the walls of this box they're building. First, a scientific background. Second, access to laboratories.
Which, that immediately cuts out 99.9% of the population. Most of us don't have key cards to bioweapons labs.
Exactly. But then comes the third one, and this is where it gets psychological. Comfort working alone.
That phrasing is so crucial. Comfort working alone. It suggests a very specific psychological makeup. This isn't a cell. It's not a committee. Terrorist cells, they usually have chatter, logistics, leaks. This crime had none of that.
So it implies a solitary operator, someone who doesn't need validation from a group.
It suggests a personality that's self-reliant, maybe arrogant, and certainly not dependent on peer approval.
It feels chillingly specific. It's not just he was alone when he did it. It's he prefers to be alone. There was another line in the profile description that it gave me chills. He said they were looking for someone who understands two things: containment and consequence. Can you break that down?
This is the key insight into the perpetrator's competence. Think about the act itself, handling weapons-grade anthrax. It isn't like handling a gun or a bomb. If you make a mistake with a bomb, well, it blows up.
Right.
If you make a mistake with anthrax, you infect yourself, your family, your neighbors. It's invisible death.
So understanding containment just means they knew how to not die while making it.
Exactly. This wasn't some accidental contamination by an amateur. The person who sent those letters knew exactly how to handle the materials so they wouldn't become patient zero. And that requires training, equipment, distinct protocols you only learn in very specific places.
And the consequence part.
That speaks to intent. They knew exactly what would happen when those envelopes were opened. They understood the dispersal mechanism. It changes the image of the suspect completely. We aren't looking for some chaotic anarchist throwing Molotov cocktails.
No.
We're looking for someone calculated, someone who respects the science enough to use it safely, but is cold enough to use it as a weapon.
That implies a very high degree of competence.
High competence and high access. And that competence is a double-edged sword for the investigation. On one hand, it narrows the field drastically. You aren't looking for just any random person with a grudge.
But on the other hand,
You're looking for someone who knows how to cover their tracks better than almost anyone else on the planet.
So if the profile tells us the who, or at least the type of who, then the next logical step is the where. And the source material gets very specific about the geography of the suspect. We're not just talking about labs in general.
No, the profile points to very specific physical locations. We're talking federal laboratories, high-level university research facilities, and private defense contractors.
And these are the places that house the specific strain of anthrax used, the AM strain.
Correct. That's a vital detail. They weren't looking at every hospital lab in the country. They were looking only at the places authorized to handle the specific, highly lethal material.
The host in the source makes a point that I think we need to dwell on. In these places, anthrax isn't a theoretical danger. It's not a news headline. It's a tangible item. It's logged, stored, handled, and audited.
It's inventory.
It's inventory. That's such a wild thought to normalize. For the rest of the world, anthrax is this invisible nightmare. But for the people in this box the FBI is building, it's just work stuff.
Yeah, like a mechanic reaching for a wrench or a baker reaching for flour.
And that familiarity must be what makes the investigation so difficult. Because if everyone in the building handles the weapon as part of their job, how do you distinguish the criminal act from the daily routine?
Well, you can't really. I mean, if you see a mechanic with a wrench, you don't assume he's going to bludgeon someone. If you see a scientist with a vial of pathogens, you assume they are doing research.
It effectively camouflages the crime within the daily grind.
Precisely. And this reliance on procedure. This brings us to the biggest structural vulnerability mentioned in the source.
Yes, the aha moment about the records. You'd think, okay, great, it's a high security lab, they have logs, they have swipe cards, just check the paperwork and see who took the anthrax.
It should be an easy spreadsheet problem.
It should be. But on paper, these systems, inventory logs, access cards, chain of custody documents, they look airtight.
Absolutely. If you were an outsider auditing the lab, you'd say, wow, nobody could ever steal anything from here without us knowing.
But clearly they did.
Because the source reveals that critical vulnerability, in reality, these systems depend on trust.
Let's unpack that because that sounds like a contradiction. How can a system be airtight but also depend on trust?
Because a system is only as good as the data entered into it by humans. So let's say I'm a researcher. I'm authorized to be there. I swipe my card. The system knows I'm there. I open the fridge. The log says I accessed the samples. But if I take 10 milliliters of a slurry and I only write down that I took 5, the system doesn't know.
The paperwork matches itself.
Exactly. The log matches the previous log. The paperwork is flawless, but the physical reality has been altered.
That is terrifying. We rely on these systems to protect us. We think the badge reader and the clipboard are keeping us safe, but really we're just trusting that the guy with the clipboard isn't a bad actor.
That's the paradox of the insider threat. Security measures are primarily designed to stop intruders, people trying to break in.
Right.
Fences, guards, locks, they are much, much less effective at stopping insiders. People who are already authorized to be there, who know where the cameras are, who know the blind spots, and who are trusted to maintain the records.
So the FBI realizes this. They realize the paperwork might be a lie, or at least incomplete. They can't just trust the logs. And this realization, it just shifts the atmosphere inside these labs dramatically.
It creates what the source calls an internal tension. Remember, at this stage, no one has been explicitly accused, there's no named suspect, but suddenly, everyone is watched.
I can't imagine what that would be like. You're going to work, doing your science, maybe you're working on a vaccine to help people, and you know the FBI is watching you. And worse, you know they're watching your colleagues.
And it changes behavior. The source details how the investigation starts just intruding on their working lives. Scientists start noticing new procedures. They face unexpected questions during background checks. There are unannounced reviews of their old notebooks.
It's like the walls are closing in. It stops being a workplace and starts feeling like an interrogation room.
It is surveillance, pure and simple, and it breaks down that professional camaraderie. These are tight-knit communities. But when you know that the profile, that solitary, competent male, matches the guy sitting across from you in the lunchroom, you start to wonder.
Comfort working alone. You see a guy eating lunch by himself, and suddenly it's not just, oh, Bob's introverted. Is Bob the Anthrax killer?
Exactly.
Yep.
The investigation has physically entered their professional space. It's no longer looking at the outside world. It is standing right behind them at the microscope.
Speaking of microscopes, let's pivot to the science itself. Because while the FBI is staring at the people, they're also staring at the anthrax samples from the letters. We have this forensic storytelling happening. This was a huge part of the source material.
Yeah, the idea that the dust itself tells a story, this is where the source material highlights the massive role of data. They aren't just looking for fingerprints, which they didn't find. They're analyzing spore characteristics, preparation methods, purity levels.
They're trying to reverse engineer the crime from the dust itself.
Right. And the data tells them three specific things: experience, precision, and intent.
Okay, break those down for us. Why do those three matter?
Well, first, experience. The purity of the sample suggests someone who didn't just grow this in a bathtub or a garage. To get that concentration of spores, you need specific nutrients, specific temperatures, centrifuge equipment. You need lab hands.
Okay, so that rules out the amateur enthusiast.
Second, precision. The way it was prepared, specifically the size of the particles, was designed to float, to aerosolize. If the particles are too big, they fall. Too small, you exhale them. These were perfect.
Which leads to intent.
Exactly. If you just want to scare someone, you send crude powder. If you want to kill people by inhalation, you process it like this. But here is the frustration, and the host in the source points this out. Data doesn't name people.
That's the limitation we often forget. We watch CSI and think the machine just spits out a photo.
Real life isn't CSI. The science can tell you what happened. It can tell you how it was done. It can even tell you where it might have come from, down to the specific flask in a specific lab. But a spore cannot tell you the name of the person who put it in an envelope.
So it's a dead end, in a way. You have all this evidence, the experience, the precision, but you still don't have a face. You just have a mirror reflecting the type of person you're looking for.
Which brings us right back to the contraction. The data confirms the profile confirms the geography, and so the investigation, it's the food of that.
Leaning, I like that word. It's not pouncing yet, it's just leaning.
It's leaning toward a specific community, and the source describes this community as people with rare knowledge, limited access, and a shared professional culture.
It's a small world.
It is a very, very small world. We're not talking about thousands of people anymore. There are perhaps a few dozen, maybe 100, who fit all the criteria: the access to the Ames strain, the technical skill, the location.
And the source points out that as the world shrinks, the intensity just ramps up.
Absolutely. When you're looking at the whole world, a mistake is just noise. If a guy in Nebraska acts weird, it doesn't matter. But when you're looking at a small community of 50 people, mistakes become monumental, as the source says. Mistakes become more consequential.
So every move these scientists make is under a magnifying glass.
Every inconsistency in their stories, every gap in their logs, every time they worked late when they didn't need to, it's all magnified.
It feels like a pressure cooker. You've taken all the heat of a massive national investigation, the panic of the entire country, and just compressed it into these few labs.
And that pressure is designed to do one thing: force the truth to the surface. When you compress a community like that, cracks start to appear. You're waiting for someone to snap or slip up or for a colleague to notice something they missed before.
It's interesting because usually we think of pressure causing explosions, but here the FBI is using pressure to cause a leak.
That's a great way to put it. They are squeezing the box.
So let's just recap where we are. We've gone from a limitless map, that movie version, to this tiny claustrophobic box. We are not looking for a terrorist in a cave anymore. We are looking for a scientist.
Probably someone who works for the government or a major university.
Someone who's comfortable working alone.
And, crucially, someone who knows how to bypass the trust-based security systems that are supposed to catch them.
The universe of possibilities has been reduced to a manageable problem. The investigation has successfully built the box.
And that is where our source material leaves us for this deep dive. We're standing on the edge of that box looking in.
It is a precarious moment. The focus is narrowed, but the suspect is still a ghost. The next phase, as the source hints, is when that intense attention settles on specific individuals. That is when suspicion replaces uncertainty.
And that is when it gets dangerous for everyone involved. Because once you pick a suspect in a pressure cooker like that, the system becomes desperate to prove it's right. The line between investigation and persecution can get very, very thin.
It's chilling to think about. We often trust that the systems protecting us are robust. Concrete, steel, digital locks. We sleep better thinking there are adults in the room keeping the bad stuff locked up.
Right.
But this deep dive really exposes how fragile that actually is.
It really does. If the most secure labs in the country, handling the most dangerous materials known to man, ultimately rely on trust rather than just paperwork, it forces you to ask a very uncomfortable question.
What's that?
How well do we actually know the systems that protect us? And maybe more importantly, how well do we know the people running them?
A little something to keep you up at night. That's it for this deep dive into the narrowing focus of the Anthrax investigation.
Always a pleasure to explore the details.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.